What's up, guys? Daniel back again with another episode of The Breakdown. Welcome back to Southern Sorcery, and thank you so much for spending your time with us. We know it's your most valuable resource, so with no further ado, let's get into it. Today, we are looking at a no-budget upgrade for the Precon Explorers of the Deep. The only goal is for us to tune up the deck with some existing cards without changing the overall feel. We're also not going to be messing around with the mana base, as we covered that in our earlier video. You can check that video out if you like. It's a $50 budget upgrade version, and it is in the link below. So go ahead and check that out. If you like this content, be sure you like and subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you will be alerted to all of our future content. And with that, let's dive in. All right, first up, I just want to go through some merfolk that we have at our disposal and can go into this deck to help it play out a little bit better. First, we're going to throw out a couple of honorable mentions that are staples as far as merfolk go. First off, we've got Curse Catcher. It's a 1-drop 1/1 that says sacrifice Curse Catcher, counter target spell, instant or sorcery spell unless its controller pays 1. Just gives you a little bit of a counter spell, which this deck sorely lacks. Next up, we've got Tidal Warrior. It is also a 1 blue for a 1/1, and you can tap it to turn a target land into an island until the end of turn. So if you have Island Walk. We also have Sea Scryer. It is an older merfolk that is 1 blue for a 1/1, and it is a mana dork that taps for 1 colorless mana, and then you can pay 1 to tap it, add a blue to your mana. So just say tribal merfolk mana dork there. We've also got Voldarian Illusionist for 2 and a blue. You can pay 2 and tap it to phase out a target creature. So nowhere as good as Mother of Runes, but fits in this deck, offers you a little bit of protection. And then lastly, we have Mist Cloaked Herald. It is a 1 blue for a 1/1 that says Mist Cloaked Herald can't be blocked. And in this deck, we've got lots of ways to put counters on it, so it just has unblockable. Those are all 5 of those are great merfolk, probably belonged in that budget upgrade video, so they are on our honorable mentions list. Okay, so first up we have True Name Nemesis, 1 blue for a 3/1 merfolk rogue. As True Name Nemesis enters the battlefield, choose a player. True Name Nemesis has protection from the chosen player. This is just a great way to get damage through, great way to be able to have a blocker up. It just really deters that person. They can't have a lot of interaction with you this way. True Name Nemesis is an auto include in nearly any merfolk deck. Runs you about $2. Next up, we have Sea Hunter. Sea Hunter is 2 blue for a 2/2. He is a mercenary, but he has the ability, you can pay 3, tap it, search your library for a merfolk card, put that card into play, then shuffle your library. So he is pay 3 to tutor for whatever merfolk you need, and that's pretty dang good. Next up, we've got the Lord himself, Lord of Atlantis. He is blue for a 2/2 that says other merfolk get +1/+1 and have Island Walk. Next we have Vodalian Hexcatcher, 1 and a blue for a merfolk wizard with flash that says other merfolk you control get +1/+1. Sacrifice a merfolk, counter target non-creature spell unless its controller pays 1. This deck lacks in any counter magic, which is silly for blue, so let's just put some counter magic on a stick and give you a 2-drop. That also gives your merfolk +1/+1. Pretty good. Next we have Deep Channel Mentor, 5 and a blue that says blue creatures you control are unblockable. I don't know that I need to explain on that a whole lot. Next up, we've got World Shaper, 3 and a green for a merfolk shaman that says whenever World Shaper attacks, you may mill 3 cards. When World Shaper dies, return all the land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. Just a way to protect yourself a little bit. You're already going to be potentially milling a lot of cards with your commander. You'll have a lot of extra lands in hand that you'll probably be discarding, and this is just a way to get all of that back in case of a board wipe, to rebuild your mana base, and then you'll be able to rebuild your board state with all the extra lands you've got. All right, moving out of Merfolk editions, we're going to move into all the other editions we have. Let's start out first with the Great Henge. The Great Henge is 7, 2 green for a legendary artifact that says this spell costs X less to cast, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. In this +1/+1 counters deck, you're going to have some pretty strong stuff, hopefully. Then you can tap it to add 2 green, you gain 2 life, and then the most important part says whenever a non-token creature enters a battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on it and draw a card. So we're already doing lots of things with the counters. We've got hardened scales, we've got branching evolution, we've got lots of ways to put more counters on, so this is just another really good way to add counters to everything that comes onto the battlefield as it enters. It's also $43. It had been like an $80 card, so it's a great time to go ahead and pick that up after it got its reprint in Lord of the Rings. Next up, we have a finisher for this deck. It is the infamous Craterhoof Behemoth, which is 5 green, green, green for a 5/5 beast that has haste and says when Craterhoof Behemoth enters the battlefield, creatures you control gain trample and get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. You typically see this in green, mono green, stompy, overrun. It is the king of overrun effects. It belongs in this deck. You're spitting out cheap merfolk. This is a great win con for this deck that really only had maybe one Simic Ascendancy outside of just big things and then giving them unblockable. So Craterhoof really fills void there. If you don't want to spend the $25 on Craterhoof, there are a couple of other options that you see in merfolk decks. I'll just briefly run these down. Slyn Voda, the Rising Deep. It is 8, and you can kick it for 1 and a blue, and when it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, return all creatures to their owner's hands, except for merfolk, krakens, leviathans, octopuses, and serpents. So you would really only want to cast this with the kicker cost. And in the same kind of vine, Stormtide Leviathan, which is also 8, 5 and 3 blue. It has Island Walk. It is an 8/8. And then it says all lands are islands in addition to their other types. Creatures without flying or island walk can't attack. So it forces your opponents to deal with that. And when you have island walk out on some of your other stuff, you can potentially get through, and then no one can attack you unless they have creatures with island walk or with flying. Not nearly as good as Craterhoof, but again, they're Leviathans, they belong in the ocean. If you're more about theme than power, you could pick one of these two. Next up, we have the infamous instant Cyclonic Rift. It is 1 and a blue, and it says return target non-land permanent you don't control to its owner's hand. And then you can overload it for 7. And that's really the reason you would want to play this. It is a one-sided board wipe. That is also sort of a win con. If you can get it and then swing through and swing out, you can get the win. Next up, we've got some counter magic. We have a blue staple, Force of Will. 3 and 2 blue, but the whole point of it is what it says. You may pay 1 life and exile a blue card from your hand rather than pay this spell's mana cost. So a free counter spell, no mana has to be open for that, is the best counter spell in the game. Next up, we've got a new card from Wilds of Eldraine. It is Agatha's Soul Cauldron. It costs 2 for a legendary artifact. You may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to activate abilities of creatures you control. So that's nice. Creatures you control with +1/+1 counters on them have all activated abilities of all creature cards exiled with Agatha's Soul Cauldron. So then you have a tap ability that also says exile target card from a graveyard. When a creature card is exiled this way, put a +1/+1 counter on a target creature you control. So it's a little bit of graveyard hate. It's a little bit of insurance against some recursion for some bigger things. Great new card. Definitely an auto include in this deck. Next up, we have Vanquisher's Banner. It costs 5 for an artifact that says as Vanquisher's Banner enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1. Whenever you cast a creature spell of the chosen type, draw a card. This is an auto include in any typal deck. So that's why we've got it in here. There's a plethora of other ones that you could use instead, Herald's Horn, etc. Next up, we also have another card that is new from Wilds of Eldraine. It is Court of Garenbrig. It is 1 green green for an enchantment that says when Court of Garenbrig enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. So a little bit of card draw. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, distribute 2 +1/+1 counters among up to 2 target creatures. Then, if you are the monarch, double the number of +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. So if it's got 2, it becomes 4. If it's got 4, it becomes 8. This card gets out of hand so quick with this deck because you have so many ways of putting so many counters on all of your creatures. With Court of Garenbrig out, they're going to get huge so fast. And with all those counters, what better way to protect them than the Ozolith? It is 1 for a legendary artifact that says whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on it, put those counters on the Ozolith. And then at the beginning of combat on your turn, if the Ozolith has counters on it, you may move all the counters from the Ozolith onto a target creature. So while it will not redistribute the counters from multiple creatures, it will put all those same counters onto one creature. So if you get a board wipe, you put all the counters on the Ozolith. recast your commander, put all those 1+1/+1 counters back on your commander, and then just alpha strike somebody. Next, we have blue staple card draw, 2 and a blue for Rhystic Study. Do you pay the 1? You pay the 1. You should pay the 1. You hope no one pays the 1. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, you may draw a card unless that player pays 1. And then finally, we have a workhorse in this deck, which is Doubling Season. For 4 and a green, it's an enchantment that says if an effect would create 1 or more tokens under your control, it creates twice that many of those tokens instead. If an effect would put 1 or more counters onto a permanent you control, it puts twice that many of those counters on a permanent instead. So counters galore, tokens galore, you're going to flood the board, you're going to Crater Hoof, you're going to win. This deck is really, really good. Just this handful of upgrades I have done to my personal copy of this Precon, and I have won 4 games out of 5 with it. It just absolutely goes off. Hakbal is a crazy value commander. He just does work, and especially with some of these other cards in the deck with these additions, he just goes bananas. It's so fun. It's so aggro. It's so fast. And it competes with anything. Thank you guys again so much for watching. If you like this content, be sure you like and subscribe. It helps us to know to keep going, keep doing this content. We really appreciate your time. We understand that it's the most valuable resource anybody has. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Be sure you have the notification bell turned on so you can catch our next video. Have a great day, guys. Bye.